So if you're a student visa holder, which is I'm guessing typical here, one of the easiest things is just keep studying. So you come here for you might come here in high school to learn English, and then you go to college, and then you get a master's degree and a PhD, and then you might get another PhD. You just keep going, and it's going to cost you a lot of money to do something like that as a foreign student. But it's possible. When people do it for a long time, they just keep doing that. Thank you. I appreciate it. That was a very nice intro you did. I want to thank you and the whole RCC team. It was such a pleasure to be able to come and talk and with Harvard with RCC and to share what I love to talk about all day every day for the last almost 15 years of my life, which is U.S. immigration law. I haven't got tired of it. I publish a magazine on it, a trade magazine for lawyers. I have a podcast on it. I have a live Wednesday show if you guys want to tune in tomorrow at I think it's 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. your time, but I take questions. I have seminars and stuff. Just email me, you get the information, info@jqqlaw.com. I'm going to have seminars on EB1A Extraordinary Ability coming up. I have ebooks I can send you, all this kind of stuff that help fill you in at no cost. You just join in on this kind of stuff. So yeah, you said my background is about that. I just love immigration law is the most important part, and I spend all day every day talking about it, reading it, and absorbing it as much as possible, and then sharing it. Because it's for people like you that make this world go around. I started wearing a globe shirt, which I like because it's the essence of humanity to move around and share your knowledge and experiences. Whether it's you're moving because you have to, because it's a bad situation, or you're moving because you want to achieve something different, which is what most of you in this group are doing, and people who are watching this. And I try to facilitate that because of the opportunity that there is in the United States. It's a special thing. There's opportunity everywhere in the world too, so it's always a good option to go everywhere because the immigration laws are strict sometimes, and a simple mistake could create massive problems for the rest of your career and your life. And that's why I always start these conversations by going over your history of, before even thinking about what the future is in your visa, what has already happened? Because I see a lot of people make mistakes and then they come to me, it seems like they have a perfect case, then we dig in deeper and all of a sudden spot issues in their past. Now, I do this so much that if I was an immigration officer, I'd be the worst one because I could find problems with everybody's case one way or another because the immigration system is so convoluted, so politicized, so many issues that everyone could have problems if they want you to have problems. Now, luckily, it's not as bad. They're not as strict for picking on people and stuff, but there's a lot of stuff that people miss that's really important. So, everyone here, and if you could share us what country you're from, what visas you're from, but typically it's going to be an F1 visa, student visa, or a J1 for the most part. And when you fill this application out, some people might have previously had, trips to the United States, either as tourist visa holders or they had work visas, and now they're coming to, study a PhD or master's, do other stuff. There's a long paper trail of stuff that's happened. And also with the application you submit for the student visa or the J1 visa, there's more paperwork. In that paperwork, the U.S. is very strict on. You could easily make errors you wouldn't think are errors because the same word that we all use could have a different meaning for immigration, or you might not think it's important, or you forgot about it, but later on it comes out to be an important issue that could be problematic. One of the biggest things, for example, would be military service. People forget about it in various countries in the world. It's mandatory, or they want some basic training, but they don't mention on the forms that they had weapons training, they're part of the military, they don't express that. Later on, you could be accused of willful misrepresentation. You lied about something, and that could stop you from getting future immigration benefits. Sometimes there's waivers and forgivenesses, but it's very tough and complicated and expensive. It's going to cost a lot of money. So you want to make sure the history of what you've done is good. You didn't, not express something. For example, a lot of people from Europe work here. You have a passport from there, so they could use the visa waiver program. It's a special program that says you online, you fill out the ESTA form, the STA, and you get approved and you come here. But many times people don't read the questions that are there to know exactly what's being asked. They just fill it out quickly to get approved. Well, anything you say there that's incorrect could be used against you for misrepresentation. So you got to make sure it's correct. If you have been arrested, if you visited Iran in the last 5 years, there's always different things that automatically disqualify you for ESTA in the visa waiver program and require you to get a full-on tourist visa. And if you answer those wrong, later on they'll come back and say, oh, you lied in that application. You're a liar. We're not going to let you come to the United States. You're deportable. We got to kick you out. So this stuff does happen, and it usually happens because of honest mistakes. Primarily, I see it because people don't fill out their own forms. The travel agent does it, or their cousin speaks English better, and the cousin doesn't take the time to go thoroughly through it. For example, a lot of you, have work experience, and you might end up working for a company in the United States, or a subsidiary or like a related company here. But when you're filling out the form in a rush, you didn't list all your work history properly. Now, or you want to file for H-1B visa or some work visa, and you're claiming that you have work experience, but then they go back and look at your DS-160 application and say, hey, on here, you didn't list this work history, and you just didn't do it because you just want to get the paperwork done quickly. And then they'll question, did you really have the work history you're claiming to have? Because in the previous application, you didn't tell us about this. And then you get denied, potential misrepresentation, all this kind of stuff. So you really want to be very thorough and go through this because these stuff do come back and become a problem. So let's say you do get the visa, you come to the United States, we're starting really sad and negative, we're going to maintain that for half of this at least. The immigration process is fraught like a minefield full of problems, but once you get here, you have to maintain your status properly. And in a non-immigrant visa category, those are temporary visas where you have to go back home. There's certain things you have to do. You can't work without authorization. We're going to go into that pretty deeply. You got to maintain your passport, the validity of it. You can't have an expired passport. That could be an issue. If you have, arrests or something like that, that could lead to your visa being voided, other problems. So all these are possible. You want to make sure you maintain it right. You file things to change the status correctly if you do it. Extensions are done properly. For example, if you're on the visa waiver program, that 90-day program to visit the United States, there's no extensions of that or changes from that. That's a locked-in kind of thing. Under extraordinary circumstances, they may give you an extra 30 days. But going back, the first thing I mentioned is unauthorized employment. I see this a lot. This is one of the biggest issues F1 students have. And a lot of times they talk to their school about it and the school is not sure and they just say, yeah, it's okay, go and work. But essentially, if you're on a student visa, you always have to get full-on permission first from the school, and depending on what level of work it is, maybe from the immigration department too, through CBIS and ICE and all that kind of stuff. So you got to know about CPT, curricular practical training, which allows you to work while you're going to school because it's part of the learning process. For CPT, you have to tell the school and get paperwork for it. So even if you're doing an internship, that is potentially taking a job from an American, so that may be considered unauthorized employment. And so you got to get permission, and that's going to system and CBIS, and they have to know where your employment is. Take it seriously, even if it is a 1-month internship or a 2-week internship, whatever it is, have the school do it. Some schools around the country don't even understand the importance of it. They just say, yeah, go and do it, and don't realize they're really hurting the student because they don't know the rules. Because what they have to know is the F1 student visa process and the nuances of it are so complicated. Most immigration lawyers don't know it. One, because most students don't hire lawyers to do it, so we don't get enough experience. And two, it's really complicated. If you go 8 CFR 214.2F or whatever the section is that has it, I've read through this multiple times and I always forget, I get confused on it. It's a long list of breakdown what the F1 student visa rules are, and it's really easy to break them. So you got to be very familiar with it. The schools may not be, they might have new employees, there's high turnover. The number of student visa holders has grown astronomically in the last 10 or 15 years. I mean, it's a hockey stick. It's like if it's a stock market, people invested 10,000, now they have 1 million. It's that much numbers of student visa holders increasing. Now for Trump, it kind of tapered and is plateaued, but it's still a vast number, and it overwhelms the schools even to do the training to get people. You have turnover, so you got to rely on your own wits, study this stuff if needed, talk with different immigration attorneys. Because one thing you're going to find is if you talk with 5 immigration attorneys, you're going to get 6 different answers, and half of them are correct, even though they're the opposite of what they're saying. It's that complicated. It's a weird system, and something I do with USCIS that works may not work for someone else, and someone does something that works for them that I did and it failed. So it's kind of a weird system. Having said all that, I should always start with this. This is general information only, not intended for individual legal guidance. And lawyers have to always give this disclaimer because each case is different. But know the OPT, CPT rules for sure. Always tell the school. Always update the CBIS record when you log in. And later on, OPT. Be very mindful of that because I've had a lot of people fail to get their OPT even though it's deserved. OPT being optional practical training, which is after you graduate and you want to get that 1-year work experience. And then if you're in a STEM major, science, technology, engineering, and math, you get some additional time after that. You have to file the Form I-765 for employment authorization either within 90 days before graduation or 60 days after. You want to make sure to file it pretty much on the first day you can, because sometimes USCIS gets it. Recently, there have been massive delays. They're trying to fix the delay issue up, but it might take months. And I've had cases where, they filed the paperwork wrong, and by the time USCIS told them there's an error or they returned the case back, the time to file for OPT was done, and they completely missed out on OPT, and all their life and career paths just disappeared in the wind. So it's a very sad situation, but you want to do it sooner. You want to go through it thoroughly. Make sure you read the instructions. I had one guy came, he signed it with a digital signature. That's not acceptable. It has to be a pen signature. One of the most frequent ones that happen is the I-20, the form I-20 that schools issue for the student F1 visa. When they issue it, they, it has to be issued within 30 days of submission to USCIS. So if you send your work permit request from I-765, the I-20 has to have been issued within 30 days of USCIS receiving it. And sometimes USCIS gets it 31 days before, all this kind of stuff. Now, recently with COVID, they created electronic systems, so hopefully that'll get better. But there's a lot of places to be problematic, so be very careful. Don't take it lightly. U.S. immigration system is not forgiving. It's not an easy thing to say, oh, they'll understand or something. They don't have understanding. So be prepared for that and maintaining status of not violating it and just continuing it. Be mindful of the grace periods of how long you can stay out, how long you can't. Marijuana laws are very important nowadays. Although many of the states of the United States and America, I mean, you guys all probably know, but America is like a big country, but it's like the European Union. There's always sub-countries, and they have all these minor states that have their own rules. Marijuana, a lot of them in California, Nevada, and a whole bunch of places is legal, but federally, it is completely illegal. So if you're not a citizen, even if you're a green card holder, if you're not a citizen and you do marijuana, the feds could deport you. And so that becomes a problem. People think, oh, it's everyone's doing it, it's all legal here, no one's gonna say anything. Unfortunately, until you're a U.S. citizen, you shouldn't even be near it because it can be problematic and it's a deportable offense. If you're caught with it or possession of it or moving around, all this stuff could be a problem for you. So be very mindful of this. And the last thing I want to say before going into like options and stuff like that is if you're on a J1 visa, J1 being the cultural exchange visa, you're coming to the United States, to learn something. The idea is it was created for you to learn stuff here, take it back to your home country. A lot of times you come here, opportunity opens up, and you don't want to go back to your home country because you found a job or something like that. There's a thing called a J1 2-year home residency requirement. And this says that they want you to go back to your home country and share that information for 2 years. You physically be in that country or the last country you resided in, and then you could come back to the United States to get an H-1B visa, to L-1 visa, or to get a green card even. So we have people on this J-1, they come here, they don't realize they're subject to the 2-year home residency requirement, and they get married to a U.S. citizen, they come to apply, they're going to get denied because that requirement's there. Now, there are waivers of it. Some waivers are easier to get than others. For example, if your home country gave you money to go study in the United States, you could get a waiver, ask the embassy of your home country to forgive it. You might have to pay the money back sometimes, and then you work with the State Department and the Immigration Department, USCIS, and they'll waive it, and you get that out of the way. But others, like if you're a Fulbright scholar, which many people probably here are, that's one of the toughest ones to get out. Or if you're a medical student, that's a really tough one to get rid of the 2-year requirement. There are ways, it's done, it's not impossible, but the complexity goes ever higher. So always check to make sure you have it or not, so you're prepared for it, not surprised. And if you could, avoid it if possible. So like I had one guy from Turkey, he was an architect in Turkey, and he took a 2-week internship course in the US with the J1. And it turns out there's this thing that's a skills list, which says certain trades from different countries. There's lists of things that they need to learn or need to work on. And for Turkey, architecture is one of them. So if you do that, they want you to, even though he was just a 2-week internship, that required him to go back to Turkey for 2 years to share that 2 week of knowledge that he learned, whatever knowledge that 2 weeks could teach him, to share it there. And he came to my office because he married a U.S. citizen, and I'm looking at his passport and it says, subject to the 2-year residency requirement. And I explained this to him. He was shocked. Now, we were able to get the waiver. They forgave it, but the Turkish embassy did, and we had to go jump through hoops to forgive it. It's possible, but that was a shock. It delayed things, and sometimes there's timeline delays where we don't have time to fix it because you have to leave the United States or some other thing has to happen. So be very careful of that and check it out. Now, even if your passport doesn't say you're subject to a 2-year residency requirement, you should look at the DS 2019. It's like the I-20 for J1s. If potentially that they don't put it there because they're not on top of it, you can always contact the State Department to get verification that you're not subject to the 2-year home residency requirement. So those are some major things for students that I see that I get worried for, or like I got to watch out for. But we're going to move on now to talk about what options there are once you are graduating. So if people have questions, I think we're going to have a chat at the end, but feel free to shoot them here or let me know what kind of visas you have so I could kind of, or what visas you want me to talk about more so I kind of tailor to the audience. But what are the options? So if you're a student visa holder, which is I'm guessing typical here, one of the easiest things is just keep studying. So you come here you might come here in high school to learn English, and then you go to college, and then you get a master's degree and a PhD. and then you might get another PhD. You just keep going, and it's going to cost you a lot of money to do something like that as a foreign student. But it's possible. People do it for a long time. They just keep doing that. So that's an option. But eventually, you want to kind of get a trajectory to get off that, make some money, make a living here. So there's a lot of different options that are there. Now, one note is, let's say you have an F1 student visa and it ends. There's a 60-day grace period. If it ends naturally, not if you violate your student visa status, drop out or something like that. But there's a 60-day grace period there. In that grace period, you could request to change status to a B1, B2 tourist visa. That'll, if approved, buy you some more time to be here. Then you could also extend to all the different work visa categories, which we'll go to now. For example, there's the E-visa, which a lot of European clients or applicants could do. The E2 visa in particular is an investor visa, which I love because it allows you to start your own business in the United States and doesn't have a minimum investment requirement. So what you first have to do is see, do you have a passport of a country that has the E2 visa treaty with the United States? Most European countries do, Japan, Australia, but most Spanish-speaking countries in general do, but big countries like Brazil, Russia, India, China, they don't have this agreement with the United States, so unfortunately they can't use it. But let's say you have the passport. Spain has this program. A lot of Spanish people do this program, E2 program. You come here and then you want to start a business. As long as you can prove that you're going to make money and be able to support yourself as business is going somewhere, there's no real minimum. They want you to, just for the sake of doing it, having some money invested. Now, I've seen people get approved with $10,000, $20,000 investment. I haven't done it. I'm weary and kind of worried about doing that low-level investment. The more, the better. And the way I put it is, if you're going to make, Tesla, car manufacturer, like electric car manufacturer, you need billions of dollars. But if you're going to make a small restaurant in the middle of Montana, you might only need $20,000 to lease a place and buy some kitchen equipment. So it just depends really on the business plan that you have, what it is that you're going to do, and how much money is needed for success in that area. So a lot of you here, all you here, are Harvard A, so that obviously a lot of recognition. You have a degree, and you have a degree as well. So you might not need as much investment money in the start to start up the situation that you're doing, because you have the mental capacity and the knowledge power and the connections to do it. And you express that to officers, say, listen, all my classmates and I, we have a plan. We all went to Harvard and we have like this thing. We have these connections here. We don't need that much money. I mean, the guy from Facebook, I was from Harvard as well. He just knew, Mark Zuckerberg knew computer programming. Potentially, he could have said, listen, as Facebook, all it needs is me and my intelligence and my network and computers. And with $100,000, we get us up and running. $50,000, we get this up and running. Later on, it's going to be more money, but we have a VC going to fund us, and we're going to really grow this, and all this is going to happen. So it's all doable. It's really about the story that you convey. So it's kind of like the show Shark Tank, where they go in and they pitch and say, hey, listen, could you give us money to these rich millionaires, billionaires there? And will they buy it? Will they believe it? And so that's what we're doing, is we're putting the story together. The investment, at least some minimum, has to happen beforehand to show you have skin in the game. But if you could do that, it's a very interesting visa. One of the most complicated parts of it is showing where the money that you are investing, where it was earned, if it was lawfully earned. And so sometimes we go back years and years worth of paperwork to be able to document where this money came from, so they know it's not illegally gained or stolen or something like that. And that gets pretty complex, that process, and that takes a lot of time. And, again, the European countries, which I think a lot of people here are, it's easier because there's more documentation of income. But we have certain countries where it becomes really complex to be able to show where the money is, because they get paid cash or something like that. And it's like, how do you document the cash? How do you document the transfer to the United States? So it gets more and more difficult. But, on my list, I have, F visas, as I mentioned, continue education. The big one is H-1B, and I'm doing this right when the H-1B season ended and the winners and the first round at least were picked today. Let me give you some background. So we have a program called for specialized knowledge workers. They're people with bachelor's degrees who want to work in the United States and they have an employer that's going to apply for them. For the most part, most of these people only have like a 3-week window of a year where their employer could file for them to go in this lottery to be randomly chosen. And there's only I can't remember the numbers right now, but there's a very few numbers of these kind of visas available. And so usually 3 or 4 times as many people than there are visas apply for it. And if you're chosen in that lottery, which today was the drawing, then you could potentially then apply for the visa and get it, maybe, maybe not. Depends on your transcripts and your proof of your education, all this kind of stuff, your background, to see whether it's approvable or not. Well, that's one of the main programs people try to do. And so it's called the H-1B cap. Now there's cap exempt, meaning you don't have to wait this, in the first 3 weeks of March to file. You can file at any time. If you're working for a nonprofit, if you're working for a research institute, if you're working for a university, they're cap exempt because they're a special situation and they could file for you at any time. And so a lot of you that go work for the university could get this H-1B pretty easily. But if you're going to work for a tech startup, it's a hard thing to do. There's different options I'm going to go into right now that's really helpful for that. If you are going to school and you're a STEM particular, well, let's start with regular OPT. So when you graduate and you have OPT for a year, that gives you one opportunity to file for H-1B. If you're not chosen, and then you have STEMs, you're a STEM major, and you get those 2 years extra, you have 2 more opportunities to file for H-1B. Now, mind you, you might have a bachelor's degree, you're in your PhD course, and you find a job. They could still do H-1B based on your bachelor's degree. So you can have additional chances, additional bites at this H-1B apple if you file sooner. So you don't have to graduate first if you already have a bachelor's degree. And there's a work equivalent part too. So I think it's like 4 years of work experience for every 1 year of education, or 3 or 4 years, but that's not as widely used. So there are different aspects of this, and I'm going to talk about this more, but when you talk about green cards, a lot of countries, green card being permanent residency in the United States, a lot of countries have programs where you start as a student and then you work your way up to permanent residency, eventually citizenship. In the US, you could jump that line. So if you're on a student visa and you have an employer that wants to get you started working, you don't necessarily have to get the work visa first and then residency. They could go directly and file for a green card category EB1, employment-based 1, EB-based 2, EB-3. All these are possible. So don't feel like you're stuck to first getting H-1B, because that's what people typically do to buy more time. They get the H-1B, they have 6 years here to go through the green card process, but you don't have to do that. You could even go back home and wait out the green card process. It could take 2 years. It could take longer if you're from India or something like that. But just don't think that you have to get the H-1B first, and the employer, when you're talking with them, say, hey, I'm vital here, I'm bringing this knowledge and you need me. Just go straight to the green card. That is an option. Now, another option, which I spoke about briefly, is the L1 Intracompany Transfer. This is if you work overseas or outside the United States for a company, and they're transferring you to a connected company in the United States. I'm not sure how much this audience will use that one, but it's one of my favorites. It's real business people that have knowledge, and they're coming here as executives, as managers, as specialized knowledge employees to come in and run the operation here. So that option is there as well for transfers. The thing that right now people are doing a lot, because the H-1B is so limited, is the O-1 visa. This is for extraordinary ability people. And recently, the Biden administration opened up in particular for people in this new technology, tech space and stuff like that. It essentially says you have proof that you're really good at what you do and you're going to do a lot of good here. So let's have you come in. Now there's criteria. Have you won awards? Have you made a lot of money? Have you been published? Have you articles been published about you saying how great you are, or you've written stuff? But there's a way to work this, and you could get a way to get a work visa that's renewable, and it keeps extending. There's no end to it. You keep extending it forever, really, as long as you meet the requirements. So that's a really neat one that's more flexible than the H-1B that a lot of people are getting into, and that's growing. So that's the O option. And there's a P as well, depending on, in general, people who use these a lot used to be artists and athletes and stuff, but it's a wide swath of people. Business people could do it. It really just is, if you're great at what you do, you can do it. And then there's these trade agreements. The e-visa is kind of a trade agreement, but these TNs, as they're called, there's a NAFTA TN, which people from Mexico and from Canada, if you're citizens in those countries, there's certain job categories that are very easy for them to go and apply for and get a work visa and come and work for a U.S. employer in those areas. You can't be self-employed, but you could do that. Singapore has this agreement. Australia has this called the E3. The Chile has it. So it's kind of random, but there's these special agreements the U.S. has to make it easy for them to come and work here. So if you're from these countries, it's something important to look at, because it's just an easier option to get things done. Now, those are changing status in the United States to another visa category, but we also have adjustment of status, and people confuse these terms. So you're changing status, you go from one temporary status to another temporary, but if you adjust status, you're rising above and you're becoming a permanent resident, a green card holder in the United States. Now, one of the requirements of the green card holders, I'm kind of jumping ahead because I'm getting so many calls on it right now, is when you're a green card holder, you're supposed to be living and maintaining residence in the United States. If you are not living here and you're more than 6 months, more than a year or longer, they could hassle you and say, hey, why do you have a green card if you're not really a resident of here? You got to start living here. So be mindful of that. If you do get the green card, don't spend a lot of time outside the United States until you become a U.S. citizen, which takes at least 5 years. Or if you're married to a U.S. citizen already, 3 years, but typically 5 years. My office, I have offices in the East Coast and in D.C. and here in Los Angeles. And we're trying to expand to Texas and Florida and all these places. Most of immigration that I do is all done by email and mail, so my location doesn't matter. But because I'm headquartered in Los Angeles and West LA, I have a lot of people from UCLA, Pepperdine, Loyola, USC that contact me, mostly graduate students and mostly women in particular. And what happens is they fall in love and get married with their classmates from medical school, engineering school, mathematics school, that's engineering, I guess, I don't know, all these different PhDs. And they get married, and that's pretty much the quickest, fastest, best thing is just get married to a U.S. citizen if you're in love, obviously. No fake marriages. But if you're there, that's the easy way. You file for adjustment of status and you get your green card as long as you have a clear background. So that's family-based. Now, you may have had a situation where your brother or sister they were citizens for some reason. They fought for your case 15 years ago, and you're studying in the United States, and your case, because brother and sister cases take so long, the time comes where you can file for the green card. Those are options too. You're here, you can file for it. You just got to see what the situation is. But that's the general family-based kind of stuff. But then we have employment-based. And employment-based breaks down a lot. So, I do want to mention a question that's coming out here because this Sabyasachi asked a question about considering that the J1 is not a dual intent visa, because I want to explain what that is. There's a 2-year residency requirement. Is it better to switch H-1B before applying for a green card? I came with the Fulbright. My partner's a U.S. citizen. We both want to stay for PhD. I cannot receive the green card even if we marry because the J1 2-year requirement. Yeah, so that's the thing. This is a really important question, and that's what I talked about a lot, so we got to be careful of. So I like this fact pattern because it's realistic, and this is what I see. So this person has the J1 cultural exchange. They're subject to a 2-year residency requirement, which means they can't switch to an H-1B until it's waived. So until you either get a waiver for it, which you're a Fulbright, is going to be difficult to do. It's doable. It's happened, but it's extremely difficult. So you either have to get the waiver or you go back to your home country and wait it out for 2 years and then come back. Now, there are some nuances. So when you offer the J1 2-year home residency requirement, you're not allowed to get an H-1B visa. You're not allowed to get an L-1 visa, Intracompany Transfer, and you're not allowed to apply for a green card until you satisfy or get rid of that requirement. But you can apply for another student visa. You could apply for an O visa, extraordinary ability visa. And these are temporary visas, but the nuance is you have to leave the United States and go to the U.S. Embassy, do a visa interview, and get the visa and come back. You can't change status in the United States to those categories. So it's going to be a problem eventually because you're subject to the rule until it gets done. But you're married to a U.S. citizen. You got to try to make the waiver or go live overseas. Unfortunately, you're stuck with it, and it kind of follows you. So we have to really just look into it to see what was the basis, who helped, what kind of agency did you work with on the Fulbright, who funded it. Ask to see if they'll forgive it, if there's letters you can get from top people in your field, or like I say, listen, this person is really important. We have them here. The knowledge that they gain is so important for the United States that maybe we should waive this. And you request it. It may work, it may not work, but it's something you have to do. But these are the things. So if you want to file for the green card, even if it seems like the easy case, a marriage to a U.S. citizen case, this trail of issues follows you. But let's get to the employment-based categories. There's 5 employment-based categories, general, EB1 through 5. EB5 is an investor program which just got refreshed in Congress. Again, a part of it was on hold, but essentially it's the big one you hear where you invest, $500 to $1 million. The laws are changing dramatically right now, but right now if you're doing a direct investment, start your own business, $5 to $1 million. If you're going to invest in what's called a regional center, it's $850 to 1.2 or something like that. I haven't followed up on new rules that came to play like last couple weeks ago, but let's put that one aside. One nuance is I talked about the e-investor program. The e-investor, where you start a business or you purchase a business, or maybe you're transferring to the United States as part of a business owned by a foreign person with your same passport. That one, there's not really a minimum. It just depends on how things are going. This one has the minimum. And also, when you're tracing the source of funds, how the money was earned, they're even more strict on the EB5 program to document it than the E2. So that's EB5. EB4 is this kind of catch-all that includes a lot of different categories. Iraqi translators during the Iraq War, people that were victims of violence against by their spouse or something like that are U.S. citizens. So it's like a random category. We're not going to go into it here. It's primarily EB1, 2, and 3 that we're going to go over, and each of them have subparts. So we'll start from the beginning, EB1A. This is one of my favorite. I'm going to have a seminar on this, so email me if you want to hear about it, but it's for extraordinary abilities. similar to the O visa category, but just tougher because it's going to get your green card, not just temporary work status. And you show there's 10 requirements, and you can show more if you could prove it, but have you won top awards in your country? Have you written articles that are like widely cited or something like that? A lot of PhD students have Google Scholar accounts that are really high and all that kind of stuff. As you're well known in the industry, you have contributions to important organizations. Have you made a lot of money in what you do? Has your work been exhibited and showcased and all this kind of stuff? So if you get that all together, 3 out of 10 criteria, and in the totality it looks good, you can get a green card EB-1A. EB-2 is another thing, EB-1B is another thing you might do. This is when universities apply for you or stuff like that for the green card. That's an option. EB-1C is like the L, which I spoke about briefly, you guys might have forgotten, but essentially it's if your company transfers you to the United States to work here, they can also apply for your green card through that process. It's one of my favorites, most fun one to do. A lot of lawyers hate it because it's frustrating doing the government fights you on it, but it's an interesting kind of case. So that's the EB-1 category. There's handpicked, nuanced kind of stuff that doesn't apply to everybody. This is probably the least used category of these top 3 categories. The next is EB-2, and it's similar to EB-3, which is you're a person that wants to get a work here and an employer's wants to apply for your green card. The EB-2 is more skilled category. EB-3 is unskilled. So if you're a cook that has 2 years of experience, you go EB-3. We do a lot of like Thai chefs, for example, that you can't find in the United States, so we have to go abroad to Thailand to bring these chefs here. Or your EB-2, you're IT worker that's knows how to do stuff on computers better than anyone else, and not better than anyone else, just knows how to do it, and you have a degree in it, then they can potentially get it for you. The nuance is that they have to do a study of the job environment in that locale. They do advertisements, newspapers to see is there anyone else that could do this job that's an American, so we don't have to bring someone from overseas, and that's a process to go through. Depending on what country you're from, the line for this could be longer. As I mentioned, India has a longer line, China to a certain extent, but for most countries, there's not that much of a line other than the bureaucracy of getting it done. And so that's EB-2, EB-3. Now, EB-2 has a subcategory called EB-2C, National Interest Waiver, which is really important for F1 and J1 students and scholars at distinguished organizations. Essentially, they're saying the work that you're doing is so important that it's in the national interest of the United States to have this person be here. And you show that by showing your history of what you've done, how you've what you've accomplished, and to show that if you are able to get the green card, you're able to continue that work, and that work is of national importance to the United States. If you could show that, then maybe a green card's really neat process, and a lot of people do that. And so a lot of the people who have PhDs and stuff get their green cards in that way. So interesting program. You get to meet a lot of fascinating people that are doing extraordinary work, and part of it is the immigration attorney actually has to learn what you do and be able to translate that for a person who has no idea what that is. So sometimes we get these cases of complex stuff, mathematics and science or whatever it is, and we have to kind of understand it. And then how can we essentially dumb it down to as simple as possible so we can fit it on paper, as short as possible space, so that anyone can understand it. So a lawyer has to be able to really grasp what you're doing to be able to then translate what it is to an officer in paper in this package that could be 1,000 pages big and make it interesting for them to read. So a lot of it is creativity and writing and stuff and these kind of things. So those are the major categories. Now there's some subcategories, like there's not enough nurses in the United States. They ease it up for you to being a nurse here, all this kind of stuff. Or there's one for not chiropractors, sports medicine. There's some sort of I forgot the terminology, but some sort of doctor that helps people who have certain injuries and stuff like that. Now I always have to mention this couple ones because they work. There's the green card lottery. So every year they have 50,000 spots that you could apply for and try to get a green card through its lottery system. It's random. Of the 50, usually like 30,000 actually get it. One important thing is a couple years ago, it changed a rule that says when you do apply for it, you have to have a valid passport. You can't get your passport later, or it can't be expired. So that's a stupid rule, but they added it. There's reasons for it. There's a lot of fraud going on, so they want to make sure the paperwork's consistent. But it gets annoying because people sometimes forget their passport. But another important part is in the diversity visa lottery, the initial application has to be perfect. No typos, nothing wrong. So if you forget to name a child, you forget to name the ex-spouse that you had or something like that, that'll immediately cause you to be denied and stuff. And sometimes they won't notice it and they'll grant the green card. Then 5 years later, you're applying for citizenship, and at that time, like, oh, you got your green card correctly, you're done. Like you made a mistake, they'll take your green card away. So don't think if you got one over them, it can still come back to you 5, 10, 15 years later. I've seen that kind of stuff happen. It's very scary. It's very sad. But that's going to be a problem. Now we have a question. Can you apply for the green card lottery even with the J1 2-year home residency requirement? You could apply, But unless you get that waived, you're not going to be able to get approved for the green card unless you get rid of the 2-year home residency requirement. That's going to follow you. But you could apply, but it's a worthless endeavor because you won't be able to do it when the time comes. So I also want to mention humanitarian cases. People fleeing. So asylum is one. Essentially, you're saying there's I'm part of a special group. LGBT group, or a person with political opinions, or religious group. That's we know who they are, and the government or government entities are persecuting them. Potentially, that's something that can happen. I don't do asylum cases anymore. I've only did a couple in the beginning of my career, but that's something there. Temporary protected status (TPS) is another. It says like right now we have this with Ukraine and Afghanistan got declared. Venezuela has that too. Where it's so dangerous to go back. If you're in the United States on a certain date, they'll say, listen, you can stay here. We'll give you a work permit. Excuse me. And up until the situation gets better in your home country, you could be here. We had this during the Ebola outbreak in West Africa for a couple of years. They said, okay, if you're from those countries where it came out of, you could be here until things calm down. Once they did, they say, okay, now go back home. There are countries like El Salvador who've had TPS for 20 years, and essentially they become American essentially, but they still haven't called it off. There's also U visas for people that are victims of serious crimes, potentially get work permits, green cards. T visas, victims of sexual trafficking. There's this kind of stuff possible. And so, it doesn't come up, it's rare, but I always mention it because people might have these situations, and instead of jumping through all these hoops, they potentially use these humanitarian grounds to just get it. So it's good to go through all the overview of options. And I just want to leave you with, again, going back to the beginning of, be careful for errors happening. One thing that's really bad is if you falsely claim to be a U.S. citizen. This is if you just, you want to get a job and you have to fill out the job application and ask about immigration status, you mark citizen. That could be the kiss of death for anything. There's no way to fix it if you falsely claim to be a U.S. citizen. If you vote, people sometimes get carried away. They didn't like the president or they like this president or whatever, and they go and vote when they're not U.S. citizens. That's a kiss of death. There's no fixing that. If they find out, they're going to deport you. It's almost impossible to fix it. Very rare cases. So be careful of that. And there's different ones of these. I'm trying to see how important it is to tell this group because I don't want to go into these weird nuances. But that's why it's good to just, when you talk with the immigration attorney, start from the beginning. Not every immigration attorney does this, but I start from zero. You're born, what happens, step by step, to try to catch if there's an issue. Usually there's not, but it's kind of like when you go to the doctor and they get your height and they check your throat and your breathing and all this kind of stuff. You probably are okay, but we got to check all this stuff to make sure it's okay. Because the government's going to do it. So we want to check this before the government gets a hold of it. I do have another live show I get every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Pacific time where I take just questions. Just you come on YouTube, JQK Law Firm, and ask your questions. So I'm there. And then a typical question I get is about timelines. So if you're watching this, timelines are very frustrating in the immigration process. After COVID happened, there's cases that are pending 2 years, 3 years at the embassy, and it's not moving forward. And it's come limited what we can do. Sometimes you sue the government over this. Sometimes you complain to a congressperson to help you. Sometimes you complain to the embassy. But most of the time, there's not much you can do. So be prepared for delays. If you're on a tourist visa and then you want to change to student visa, it could be a year before they approve it, if they approve it. So there's a lot of delays packed in here that there's not much you can do anything about. But it's just good to know it so you get less frustrated because at least you know that there's delays in this cake, but baked in this cake. But today they announced just today that they're doing several steps to make it faster by adding the ability to pay more, like $2,500 to get a decision on your case, certain types of cases faster. They're going to go out of the way to just be stopping slow. They put together, I don't know, like they got an extra $750 million to try to speed things up. And they're asking, Biden's asking for another like 400 or 500 million to get more funding to speed things up, to get more manpower and gal power. But the problem is, even if you hire somebody, it's going to take forever. And there's a cultural issue within the agencies because of the political situation. When Trump was here, you put the heads of the agency as people who don't want people to immigrate here, and then you change it 4 years later, and then another group comes. It's just like it creates a insanity for the regular day-to-day employees because they're like, every day the job's changing. We don't know what we're doing because the rules change. And when they do surveys, the federal government accountability office, GAO, has done surveys of all the federal agencies. USCIS has the lowest customer or employee satisfaction of all the agencies. And I can see that's happening because every day the rules change. It's very complicated. You don't get respect. You probably don't get paid as much as you should. So that's going to have an effect on the people using this service. Now they call it USCIS, U.S. Immigration Service, United States Citizenship Immigration Service. But that service part, especially during the Trump administration, was thrown to the wind, and they went out of their way to change their mission statement to say it's not service anymore, it's enforcement. We want to make sure people are not doing fraud. And it's like, dude, there's millions of people coming here. 99.9% are just trying to make a regular living, no fraud involved. But when you look at everything, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So if you're trying to find fraud, you're going to find it. So that mentality is getting away. Although people got recruited into that system that believe in that, and they're still there. That goes away. But new president comes, they could come back again. So it's a very frustrating thing because of the lack of consistency and how politicized we're doing here is. But it is what it is, and I think we're making America a great place by bringing so much talent in one place and giving an opportunity and openness. And so God bless it, and let's just keep doing it. But hopefully that information helped. I know I speak kind of fast and I go through these quickly, but I've done a recording of this with your permission. I could put it on a page and people could access it later too. And that way, you catch it on your time. I know it's 3:30 here in Los Angeles, but it's evening time on the East Coast. And it's cold and there's storms coming, so it's hard to always settle in this kind of stuff. But thank you so much, RCC, for having me. It was a great pleasure.